All right, so let's continue off. I read some of your feedback and had a bunch more thoughts about this whole how to stop being generic thing. So last time we talked a lot about things like world building, and I guess the other thing would be, well, you can't just I mean, if it is good to have a franchise that's God, I hate these terms, franchises and IPs, and the more I use those terms, the more corporate sounding it is and industry sounding it is. You have to kind of keep in mind that before all of this crap, there was people like Hans Christian Andersen and all the people who would write the fairy tales for the kids were just people who were they didn't have any freaking industry, and I think they were able to make things which people would call original, and they didn't pay attention to any of that stuff. And I would part of me wants to say you should just disregard all of that stuff that the industry says. I would say don't be afraid to disregard it because you know the thing about the industry is that the industry sets the, the beat of the drum of the industry is just to follow what is successful. Oh, sorry, microphones going crazy. Yeah, industry just follows what's successful and eventually tends to genericism. So if you want to make something new and you want to, okay, look, it feels like if you're going to go into the industry and you're going to try and make something new, you're going to be, these things seem to be at odds with one another. And so it means that you're going to have to approach this as an outsider. If you want to be non generic and you want to be original, we'll take the word original and take the first part of that and say origin. Origin to be the starting point of something. So if you want to be original, then it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to look at all of industry and learn to play along with the band. You need to figure out how to start something and how to be the start for something. Now, original does not necessarily mean unique. These are two different things. Unique means there's only one of them. Original means that you are the starting point. So just because something unique doesn't mean it's useful, does not mean it's good. What you want is you want to be, if I think original is more important. And original means that you arrive as an outsider. Right? You don't, I'm not saying that you have to be a misfit. Right? You don't have to be a misfit, nor do you have to be someone who's a conformist. Right? You don't have to be either of these two. You just have to be an outsider. And what I mean as an outsider, meaning an outsider to what? Well, an outsider to everybody else, right? That's what industry is. Industry is convention. The opposite. Right? You're coming from outside of the hive, and maybe you look at the hive as an outsider. So I think this is really what it means to be original, is that a lot of the people who wrote stories way back when, before there were any of these conventions, before there were any of these industries, they weren't in a hive to begin with. And I mean, there were societal conventions, but the thing is that they had their own opinions. So I would say and these aren't opinions that are necessarily handed to you and taught to you, right? Right? You interpreted what you learned. You interpreted what you right? And I think when you create a story, if you're going to be a story writer, a story is an interpretation. It's an interpretation of events, of things that, you know, don't talk to strangers, right? Like that might be a thing. Um, Interpretations of things like of hubris, human hubris, and weakness, and overcoming weakness, and like a story is largely about. I'd say a story. Stories are often metaphorical, and if you understand what a metaphor is, right? Metaphor is whenever we substitute one thing that we can visualize and understand, you know, very very simply, but we can use it to kind of substitute for another meaning as well. So right, stories are metaphorical, and I would say that they're metaphor they're also mimetic, right? These two things, it means that, you know, you can really here let me dig up an animation that I made here. Let me. You want to see one of my shit posts? This is a shit post that I made for like um for like the Unity forums. So one of the problems in Unity is that there's a lot of these like progress bars that always show up whenever I'm working on a program and I'm trying to get my game finished. I'm trying to, you know, work on things, make edits and whatnot. I keep having to wait for the editor. The editor throws up a progress bar that says, you know, updating this thing, compiling this thing, reloading this assembly, and so it's hard to get anything done. And then I thought of like Star Wars, and there's this scene where like in the Empire Strike Back, where Luke is getting bashed up by Darth Vader from different directions by telekinetically thrown objects, and he just can't see. Like, so yeah, I basically made my own shit post. I made it in hit film. Luke's just trying to, you know, deal with the current task at hand. You know, he's getting slugged by progress bars. He just can't seem to get anything. He just can't focus. Yep. And then there's all the progress bars, and the day's productivity goes flying out the window. Right? This is what a meme is. A meme can take us, you know, it's like, this is what a visual metaphor is. So interesting thing is, you know, if you can make shit posts, you can write stories. You can take, you know, in this case, this is just one of my day-to-day difficulties, one of my day-to-day annoyances, and I'm just like, I just needed to show the Unity staff, just like, this is how I feel when I'm constantly seeing these freaking progress bars, right? Stories are metaphorical. They're mimetic, right? If you understand what memes are like it's like a little bit of a container, a kind of a structure. It's a relatable structure. People have seen a movie, they get the feeling of that, and then you can just insert a new meaning into that. So you want to come up with stories. I mean, I'd say the current trend of generic isekai novels where, you know, somebody in the modern world dies prematurely and then is sent off to another, you know, fantastic land to live a new life with knowledge, with the memories. It's like that's such a meme. It's a meme. It's a fucking meme. It's like I would almost call these isekai shitposts. These are shitpost isekais because they follow the same damn format, almost like always. Almost always. The only ones that I actually like are the ones that are like atypical. The ones that somehow take the all the tropes and then they come at it from the opposite end and it becomes a comedy. Those are the only ones I actually enjoy. The rest I'm like, I can only stand maybe the first two chapters, and then after that, I'm like, oh, I can see where this is going, and then I drop it because it's predictable. So yeah, it's like if you've ever read a lot of like isekai manga, you probably understand how this thing works. The meme is just the format. So I think for a lot of people who want to get into comics, right? Like let's talk about what the average aspiring mangaka, the average aspiring mangaka thinks, I just need to learn how to draw. Right? That's the first thing they think about because it's the most obvious, right? It's the most visibly obvious. So, and you think that if the drawings are good, then, people will read my manga. Right? And then somehow the rest will just fall into place. Look, I can appreciate this level of just fuck it, let's just do it. Right? I can very, very much appreciate how you can overthink things and procrastinate. And I'd say that, like, the thing about a lot of the isekai mangas is that although they're generic, I can certainly appreciate the fact that they did something. They did something. They got off their fucking asses, and so they're winning that war. Good for them. But the problem is that yeah, okay, I do read them, but I only read the first two chapters, and somehow the rest falls into place. Doesn't hold it doesn't hold me. Hold me. I just want to be held. So yeah, that's going to be taken out of context. So yeah, this is what it comes down to: is that they've got the shitpost meme down, but they haven't figured out what they want to say about the world. So you got to think, what's your own point of view? Like, the only reason why I'm able to talk about this stuff now is because I'm getting on. I'm getting kind of old. So it means that I've gotten a little bit curmudgeonly in my ways, and I have my own point of view on the world. And so I actually am, as you grow older, you get into a better and better position to write because you become, you've seen enough of the world and you've been through enough shit that you start to, form your own opinions of things. And I say that I'd say that the older you get, the more of an outsider you may actually find yourself becoming. The easier it is to become an outsider. There are some old people who wind up just being total conformists the whole time. But I'd say that if you are the type to be seeking, to become an outsider, to become their own person, then I tell you, you really become like a bit of an eccentric outsider. We look at some of the, there's that wonderful trope of the wily old man, that crazy guy. And it's just because he's been alone with his own thoughts long enough, and he's been old enough for those thoughts to age like wine. And now he's become kind of set in his ways. So yeah, we're probably, well, okay, so let's talk about, as an old fuck, what do I think about the world, right? So well, I don't really think that much about the world because I haven't really, I've traveled and done some tourism stuff, but do I really care about the world? Honestly, no. I don't care what happens like halfway around the world because I can't change it. So, I say, what is Mark's world? Right? So, and this is what you guys have to, this is the process, right? You have your own names. What's your world? This is my world. Okay, so yeah, this is my world. And my world is pretty local. It's pretty local. It's these four walls. No, sorry. There's four walls ceiling and floor. Plus, I rarely ever go out of the house. I'm not a shut-in, right? I still talk to my mom. I still talk to people on the internet, I suppose. I can go out for like appointments and stuff. I find it tiring, but it's fine. I'm not a hikikomori. But my world is very inside here. What was it before that? Right? So that's the thing, is that you don't have to just look at what's your world that you're inhabiting right here, right now. You can also ask the question, when is Mark's world? And you can think about times in your past life where, maybe you weren't exactly ensconced inside a building in during the COVID tyranny, and I just said the bad word. We're going to get a little notification at the bottom of the screen that's going to say, it's going to say you have to go look up the WHO, the proper authoritative. Okay, well, I think we're all sick of that. I said the fucking word. Damn it. Okay, so when is Mark's world? Well, let's think about all the different points in my life. I tell you, like, childhood tends to stick with you. Really, like, childhood seems to last the eternity. Like, it really sticks with me. And it sticks with me because I feel like this is where the outsider's opinion really comes in. Because I've always felt like an outsider. Like, it's like I didn't, like, in college, I had a circle of friends. In late high school, I had, I started to form a decent circle of friends. But, before that, it's like I didn't really have a circle of friends. I was the guy who got picked on a lot. So I would think of that very much as being an outsider. Plus, whenever I would say that a lot of times my relationship with the school system was very adversarial, because I'd figure shit out for myself. I studied science on my own. I did my own little science experiments. I had good books, Osborne series books, and I read up on that stuff. There was also the TV Ontario Eureka series, which taught me a lot about science, and I watched a lot of shows that were about that kind of stuff. Back in the days when that stuff was actually good. And I didn't need school to teach me anything that I know right now. In fact, most of the stuff that I know right now is stuff not taught by school. So, when is Mark's world? School years. Right? And so that means that if I were to think about what do I, you've got to find the thing that you really, really like can fucking put a finger on. The things that you really give a shit about, right? So to me, school is basically the institutional learning. What it's like. Right? Right? These are things that are what it's like being forced to work on pointless things. What it's like when you learn, or it's like school prepares you for the real world, but not in the way that you think. What school's like for a nonconformist. So, yeah, I have a lot of trauma, right? This is the thing is that if you did not have a great time, if you have traumas, like story writing is really good for working this shit out, because you're gonna find the things that really like you find the things that hit home, and then you can write about them, and you can think about, on being abused, by other people in school. You can talk about things like desire for revenge. We're going right there. We're going right there. Right? You can talk about your desire for revenge, desire for escape, desire, or maybe we can talk about how the disillusionment of authority that is, that was supposed to protect you. Right? Now we're getting, into some real fucking good meaty topics to talk about. You can write a really good story about any one of these themes. Right? You could write a revenge tale. You could write one which is about successful, and what follows after. So that's another interesting one, right? So you can have a revenge tale where, somebody is tormented, and then they plot and figure a way out to enact their revenge. Or you can start the story where they successfully achieve revenge, and then we have to figure out what is the aftermath. So these are like, two interesting, very, very interesting stories that you could tell. The desire for escape, and you can talk about, and the thing is that when you tell a story, it doesn't have to be autobiographical, right? Like you don't have to tell the whole thing inside a school environment. You can just change the names and faces and places around until it becomes, a prison, or it becomes, maybe you're in a dungeon, in some medieval castle or whatever, or maybe there's or maybe you're a slave in some fantasy setting, again, it doesn't have to be a fantasy setting. It could be a sci-fi, dystopian setting. And so, this is the interesting thing, is that this is what I mean by stories are mimetic, right? You can, the genre of the story and the setting and the world build and all that stuff is really just, it is like the cosmetic microtransaction skin that you craft around the idea. And so I just say, if you have never suffered in your life, if you have had a great, wonderful life and nothing bad ever happened, I don't know, if there's anybody in the world who's like that. I mean, they must, and if they do exist, they must be the most miserable people in the world. And I say they're miserable because they if nothing bad ever happened to them, there was never a motivation for them to improve, to adapt to this stuff. And it means that they're now the most vulnerable people out there. If they had a completely wonderful and perfect, happy life out there, it means that when shit hits the fan, and believe me, life comes at everybody fast, and it comes when you least expect it. The people who have never suffered at all in their lives are the most at risk for falling into deep shit and not knowing what to do about it when it finally hits them. So I think that everybody, almost everybody here in Present Company probably has some traumatic experiences. Don't worry. You're not a bad person for it. This shit happens to you. This is part of how you deal with it. Don't worry, we're all damaged goods. Okay, we've all been look, our caregivers and our caretakers and the institutions that we go through and the society that we go through. I mean, it's like they're like, well, I mean, if we're the damaged goods, then these institutions and all these other structures around us are like the UPS and the. Well, actually, no, UPS is pretty good. They're all right. But I mean, they're like the postal service that has you know, been involved in shipping and manhandling, and they've really beaten the shit out of your package and it's come late. Okay, so that's that's a way to look at it, right? And it's made us damaged people, and it means that, you know, we when we're in charge of anything and we become part of the society, we also become mishandlers of packages as well. Packages being other people. So this is where you get your ideas. This is how you stop being generic. This is how you become original. You become the origin of the story. You go and you dig into your past and you find the most unpleasant time of your life. The time when you couldn't do a goddamn thing about it. You know, when things felt like they were under control, like out of control and chaotic. Because the whole point of a story, right? Oftentimes when they have a story, they have a protagonist, and the protagonist is thrown into a chaotic situation. And also, you know, because we're looking back upon our past selves, we're hopefully better now. I know I've mellowed out a lot more. There's a lot of things that I know now. And you can now look at this and you can examine your past life from outside, you know, from an outside point of view. And you can start to think about, you know, you've got, it's funny is that you're actually viewing your past life as an outsider. So you're now the outsider to your past self, and you can approach it that way. So yeah, that's how you become original, is be the goddamn origin. It's really that simple. And then your story and the telling of it and all that is just a metaphor. It's just like making a meme.